Okay. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. So this is Automate Drupal 9 upgrades addressing deprecated code as a community at MidCamp 2020, where we're all doing this digitally. Yeah, if you want, the slides are up on the MidCamp page right now. So if you want to look at those and kind of follow along, you can. They have links to a bunch of stuff here. Yeah, as references, I might post a couple links in the chat as we go too, but yeah, that stuff's there. I am Dan Montgomery. I work as a senior engineer and technical architect at Palantir.net. Palantir.net is a digital consultancy that provides web strategy, design, and development services to clients that include higher education, healthcare, and government. So this talk is, we're going to kind of cover, a lot of it is going to be focused on Drupal Rector. We're going to do a little bit of context setting at the beginning about updates from Drupal 8 to Drupal 9, what that process typically involves. Michael, who's on the call here, had a session just before this, and he went into more detail around that. So that's a really good one to look at as well. If you want to find more information. And then we're going to go to the Drupal Rector tool and kind of talk about what it is, how it works, how you could develop with it, and then kind of some resources that if you want to start development, what are the first stages that you need to kind of do that. And then we'll finish with our goals for that project and some kind of broader community goals. So the context. So real briefly, Drupal 8 code will mostly continue to work in Drupal 9. This is different from previous upgrades where people have gone from 6 to 7 or 7 to 8, and there's been a lot of changes, particularly 7 to 8. In Drupal 9, most of this stuff will continue to work as Drupal 8, as your Drupal 8 custom and contributed code. The deprecated core functionality is the key piece that you might need to pay attention to. And that's going to probably necessitate updates to custom code or contributed code. The good news is that there's quite a number of deprecations over the life of Drupal 8, but we can cover 2/3 of those by addressing about 15 deprecations in custom and contributed code. And so what that kind of looks like, this is a little bit out of date. This is that list of that top 15. And even amongst those top 15, the biggest one by far covers quite a lot of that. It looks like, I don't know, I'm just kind of guessing from this, but it looks like 40% or something of those deprecations of the top 15 are just this one, which in this case is Drupal set message. There's more, this graph is updated on Acquia's page. There's also more information on that page or section of the Acquia site, which we'll get to in a bit. But this means that there's opportunities to really focus on a handful of things that cover a wide use case. Yeah, so what's the process for updating your custom and contributed code from 8 to 9? The general thing that you're going to have to do is identify what code needs to be updated. You'll need to understand the new method that exists. So, if it's a replacement, if there's kind of a new pattern. Somebody's making some jokes. You'll need to apply the update, and then you probably need to test the update. In terms of identifying the affected code, there are a few different ways. One of the ways that's available is on that, it's kind of sitting besides that link that I had sent before. And Acquia has this tool that you can scan contributed code. And so it uses PhpStorm, which is a tool that kind of analyzes code, and then it'll scan all the contributed projects on Drupal.org and provide a summary of those deprecations. An example of what that looks like is this message. It gives you a pretty good starting point for what you need to do. So it'll say, this is a call to the deprecated function, Drupal set message. it was deprecated at this point in time, 8.5, and it's not going to exist in 9. I think all the 8 point whatevers are going away in 9, so that part is not really unique. And then it tells you, in a very broad sense, you need to use add message in the messenger interface or in that service. So that's kind of a starting point. I think they might be linked on the Acquia page, maybe not. I don't remember, but that's kind of a good starting place if you don't want to kind of spin something up locally. It's an online tool. Drupal Check is another tool, and Michael had pointed out that there's I forget the name of the module, like update status maybe, where you can run this as a module rather than as command line. But this is a project that uses that same PHP stand, and it checks for deprecations amongst other things. So it'll look for other things as well, but we're kind of talking about deprecations mostly for this discussion. This is available as a composer package, and it's packaged up as this var package, which is a PHP method for kind of making an executable-like thing to avoid dependencies. So, Composer has packages, or when you include things as composer packages, they can include a whole bunch of other things, and they just kind of live all in the same place. But this is an attempt to kind of remove some of that conflicts. So it's not super important, but it's just something to be aware of, maybe. So yeah, those are two tools. We're not going to talk too much about them anymore because we want to get into kind of what you can do to replace them. So understanding the replacement can be kind of challenging depending on your familiarity with the different systems and your familiarity with Drupal.org and how the kind of change notices are released. So one thing you can do is you can go to Drupal.org, and in their API documentation, they kind of have these different places that you can see on the pages. So if you're looking up the Drupal set message page, it has this sort of peach-colored notification that says, hey, this thing, it's the same message that you saw before. It's like, this thing is not being used anymore. You should use this other one. That's a link to the new system, which is nice. The other thing that you'll see, which is the one on the bottom here, is that the change record is also linked. It's not called out as the change record, but that node, et cetera, is the change record. And that change record has a lot more information. So it basically tells you, here's a bunch of issues if you want kind of the backstory of it. And then it includes a general description usually. I haven't looked at all the change records, but the ones that I've looked at kind of follow this pattern, where they have a general recommendation, and then they kind of walk you through some examples. So in this case, it says, hey, for Drupal set message, you're going to need to get that messenger service, and then you're going to need to call any number of methods on that service because it's not passed as an argument anymore. It's kind of, you have to find the right one, and you have to pass in the message to those. It's not super complicated, but it's not as simple as like find and replace a text string with another one. And you might not know, you might want to kind of read through this and kind of understand what's going on. Another way you could do this is if you're doing local development with your IDE. This is PhpStorm. It'll kind of cross out things for you or indicate that while you're using this code, like you shouldn't be using this. This PhpStorm puts a strike through it, and then it says, if you hover over it, this is deprecated. If you use PhpStorm's command or control and click on it to kind of go to the definition of Drupal set message, you'll see something like this, which has a lot of the stuff that you just saw before. So this is in the Drupal code base. It says, see that node, it's not called out as a change record, but it does, again, point you to that thing. And then it says, this is deprecated, and the message that's a trigger error is saying, like, this is the change record, go see here for more information. So that's kind of, if you're developing new stuff, you'll see it there. Or if you're looking through your old code. So in terms of applying the updates, we really kind of have two methods. You could do it by hand based on reading the change records, and you could basically copy and paste the examples, modify them as you need to. The code completion tools in the IDEs could be really helpful because you'll find out right away if you're using methods that actually exist, or if you're not, or if you need to, the parameters are not lining up the way you expected. in this case, it went from 2 parameters to another method with a single parameter. Another option is to try to do this automated. So because such a large number of the deprecations are covered by such like a relatively small number of these, it's a pretty good candidate for trying to automate this stuff. So right now we're working on a project called Drupal Rector. It's a command line tool, and it's available as a composer package. So you can install it using Palantir.net, Drupal Rector. It's on packages. So that's why it has kind of the Palantir.net prefix. When you use that tool, it looks like this. You basically call that binary file, which is Rector. Rector is actually just a broad PHP tool, which I'll talk about in a minute. So you're calling that tool, and then you say the task that you want, or I forget what they're called here, but you want to call the binary and you want to process your code. You link to a module or a folder. It kind of does everything within that. And then in this example, we're doing dry run as an argument, which means it's not going to update anything. It'll just tell you what's going on, but you can remove that and then it will actually update your code. So it's a pretty easy tool to use once you've got it configured. The output from this looks like a diff record. So if you're used to using, or sorry, it looks like a git message or any other diff. It basically, tells you, hey, we were going to remove Drupal set message, and then we were going to replace it, in this case, with like the very kind of hacky way of, we're not going to load a service or anything. We're not going to do dependency injection. We're just going to do a static call because we know that works from anywhere. And we're going to do add status. And it'll list this for all of that code that you just listed. And if it didn't apply Drupal set message anywhere, it just won't do it. It does the rules that you've included in your configuration. So what is this tool? So it's built on that Rector PHP tool. So it's also using a FAR version, like I mentioned before, to avoid conflicts. Rector itself is a tool that can be used for a lot of things. So it supports other frameworks. It supports like upgrades from PHP 7 to 7.1. I think, I don't remember which specific versions, but it basically will attempt to do these updates for PHP things, for other libraries, for custom rules that you might write. And so it's this framework for doing this, these updates. And there's a lot of stuff that already comes packaged with it, and we're trying to add Drupal specifics to it. Drupal Rector itself is basically an easy way to use that tool. That's the first part. The second part is it comes with default configuration. It was kind of tricky for us to connect the dots and make sure that all the auto loading was working the way Drupal needs it to work, so that it can kind of connect things. So I guess this is maybe a time to take a step back. So I mentioned that Drupal Rector isn't doing like replacing one string with another. It attempts to analyze the code within the context, and it knows that like this is a method or this is a class. These are the arguments for it, and it kind of understands the inheritance of the classes and what's there, and does sort of there's a name for this, but don't remember off the top of my head, but it kind of figures all that stuff out. And so because it does that, it needs a little bit of configuration, and that configuration is included in this Drupal Rector project as a starting point. And the last thing, I forget, sorry, Jason, are you asking if it does reflection, or is that the name for it? Yeah, offer has the link, or has the name for it, AST, which stands for something, I don't remember. But it basically understands the connections between these things. The last thing it does is it includes a bunch of examples. Chris is saying abstract syntax tree. Thanks. So yeah, it includes a bunch of deprecation examples. That's what I find the most useful when I'm doing this stuff, is like, what is the before example and what's the after example? If it says like, go use this new method, that's helpful, but it's not the easiest thing for me to kind of learn how to do the new stuff. The other thing that the examples help us with is you can download this tool and run them on the examples and see that the things work, or how they work, the updates. So I kind of got sidetracked there for a bit, but the last stage is that you need some way to test this. You can either manually test it by creating examples and testing your code, just kind of poking around and seeing if anything breaks. Or you can use automated testing like any of the tools that people will commonly use. I'm not going to go into any of that too much because that's not the focus of this discussion, but it's probably something that you'll need to figure out. So kind of to review, in order to update your code, you're going to need to identify the affected code. Drupal Check is a really good tool for that. You'll need to understand the replacements. So Drupal.org and blog posts on the internet are really good help there as well. Applying the updates, hopefully Drupal Rector can be a tool to help that process. And then testing the updates, you can use these PHP unit, bhat, et cetera. So I think the takeaway here is that there's a lot of information and there's a lot of tools out there. So it's not, I think it's an optimistic view. Like we're like a really good situation we're in where going from 7 to 8 was pretty challenging, but going from 8 to 9 has already been less of a challenge because of the kind of way that the deprecations have been introduced and the upgrade path. And then these tools are kind of helping to fill in the remaining gaps there, of doing those last bits. Cool. So what's the current state of Drupal Rector? So Drupal Rector currently supports Drupal set message in the most common use cases, or what we kind of imagine the most common use cases are. It supports them in kind of an initial way, which doesn't necessarily do it doesn't right now do the dependency injection or some of the other ways that might be better long-term, but it kind of gets your code in a working state. It does partial support for Entity Manager, and there's a pull request open for getMock, which is part of the PHP unit or like sort of overall testing framework. And I think those are the top 3, although I know Drupal set message is the top one. I think getMock is the second one. So these are like already very, very widely used deprecations. And I think Entity Manager has been there. And Offer is saying that database query and sort of those remaining ones are almost ready for a pull request as well. So yeah, kind of going down that list of 15. Entity Manager is actually one that was deprecated in Drupal 8, like not 8.1, like right away, it was decided that this was, I'm pretty sure it was Entity Manager, like this wasn't a thing that we wanted to use, but because it was in the controller base, I think myself and everybody else just used it everywhere. And so there are some of these things that are very old, but so the deprecations are not necessarily just new things that have been deprecated. Cool, so Drupal 8 Rector, which has the number 8 in there, is another project that this kind of came from. So there was an original project called Drupal 8 Rector, and it was very similar. The Drupal Rector project is a fork of that project in the sense, like we kind of took inspiration from it. It's not a direct fork on GitHub, but it's kind of related to that. We took a lot of information from that. It includes a couple more rectors or things that might cover additional Drupal deprecations. It also attempts to cover things beyond deprecations. The caveat there is that they might not all be working with the current versions of these tools. Drupal 8 Rector hasn't seen a lot of updates lately, and it isn't using like the FAR package or newer versions of Drupal Rector itself. And so some of those things have changed. The change to use a FAR package to eliminate those conflicts was something that was kind of new as of, I think, early this year, and Offer did a lot of work to make sure that that was working with this setup. The challenge there is that like it uses Symfony, we're using Symfony, the versions are not the same, we can't have those things conflicting, and it was just kind of a problem that everybody was having here. So that's addressed a lot of those issues. Developing rectors. So this is kind of the process that we're going through in the project. We're creating examples, and then we're creating the rectors themselves, which includes creating a class, registering the class, and then developing the refactor code. So the first thing I have been doing when we've been making these is we have an example module in the repository, and we're just adding a bunch of deprecated code to there. So this is an example of a class that's in that custom module. and it says, you know, hey, we're calling Drupal set message the deprecated way. And then we create a class. So this is in the source directory. And this is very similar to how Drupal does things. So we're creating a PHP class. The PHP class extends abstract rector. We give it a name. And then it has these three primary things, which we'll go through in details. But basically, you kind of give it some definition. You define what this applies to, and then how it applies the update. Sorry, Chris is asking, what kind of test coverage do we have? Yeah, we're going to get into like what nodes are, because the nodes are a different thing in this case. Test coverage is, we don't have it running this test and confirming that the things work. So the answer to that might be kind of no automated test coverage, but those examples are meant for that. Yeah, I'm going to explain the node thing in a second here. So cool. But those are good questions because it is very confusing. So you define this class, and then you register this class. And the registering is very similar to Drupal as well. So there's a YAML file. In this case, there are the configurations. And so we're saying we've bundled them by what minor version of Drupal they apply to, where they were introduced in. So we have like Drupal 8.5 deprecations, and they're all bundled up into like Drupal all deprecations. In this case, like this is the full file for that because it only includes Drupal set message. And all you need to do is list the class, and then that's it. There are many more things that you can do to make this complicated, and we've tried to use the most simple example because we anticipate people using this tool are not going to be super familiar with the tool, and we wanted to make it easy to jump in and see how it's working. The tilde in YAML means null or something like that, and it basically just means this is the key for that thing, and there's no, it's an empty object that is the definition for it. We're not defining anything for these keys. That was something that was new to me. All right, so yeah, we're getting into those class of the actual thing. So the getDefinition, I don't know if this is actually required. I think it's required, and I don't know that it's used anywhere, but it's useful for people that are looking at it to kind of understand what you're trying to do at the least. So you have a string that says, you know, this is the description of what I'm trying to do. And then you can create this object, which is called like a code sample. And you can say, this is the old example and the new example is the simplest thing. And I've seen that in a lot of these Drupal Rector. They call them Rectors, I guess. So yeah, this is kind of a pared down version to make it fit on the slide, but there's other examples in the Drupal Rector project. GetNode type. So this is so nodes are not Drupal nodes. So that AST concept, I don't know if nodes is a thing in that or if it's a specific Rector thing. I think it's probably from AST. But the concept is just that you have things that your PHP code is made up of. They're classes, they're statements, they're variables, they're arguments to methods, they're method calls. Like everything is a node. Nodes can have other nodes within them, I think, or at least they're connected to other nodes. Yeah, and so that's what a node is. A node is literally like anything in PHP, and whenever you see that in Rector, that's what it's referring to. None of this is Drupal-specific code term for nodes. So in this case, there's a bunch of classes that define all those different things. A function call is a type of an expression. It's like a subtype of expression, and the : class means that this is going to take the string from that and then say that this Rector applies to anything that's a function call. So it only runs on those. So the refactor method is the main thing that you're going to be doing most of your work. You've kind of already defined that this is a thing that you want to run. You've defined what things it applies to. And then you need to figure out, like, well, how do I actually convert it? So there's a lot going on here, and I've actually removed a bunch. But more or less, we're creating a node that's a static call. So the thing that we want is that, I don't know if people can see my mouse, but the thing that we want is at the bottom here in the comment. We want to have a static call to the messenger service. And then that's going to have a call. We're going to, I don't know if I'm using the right terms here, but we're chaining another call on that call to add status, and that has the example message argument. So every single thing here is a node in Rector ideas. And so we need a node called Drupal. And this is a thing that's a fully qualified node. That's the name of it. And yeah, that's just called Drupal. And that gives you this like /Drupal. And then we need a static call, which knows that it does the : messenger with the thing. And so that's what we're creating here. And we're nesting them inside of each other. And then method is a simple identifier, which is just this string that I think is just add status. And we're kind of combining them in the last step. So we're creating a node that's a method call, which is this like whole thing. It's going to be the method, which is add status, on the messenger service, which is Drupal messenger. And then the arguments that it's getting is example message. I didn't show you how to define arguments here, but it's in the code if you want to take a look. So the benefits and the drawbacks of this, the drawback is that it's very, very complicated for somebody to like onboard to. The benefits are that you can swap out like pieces of this and maintain all the other nodes. So if you needed to change add status, you could change add status and keep all the arguments from what was already passed to it, where you can modify the list of arguments and like remove one of them. So it's pretty intelligent for knowing like what are all the pieces and what are they connected to. All right. So that being said, like what are the resources that you have in terms of developing these things? We'll kind of walk through some of them, and then I forget what the other sections are, but we'll come to those. So yeah, so one is that we kind of have this, so how are we doing the development for Drupal Rector? So we have the code repository on GitHub. It's a public repository. Everyone can come and take a look at that. It has the example modules. It has the Rector stuff. It has a README that's hopefully helpful. There's pull requests on GitHub. There's an issue queue that's on Drupal.org. So there's some discussion going on there. If you want to kind of sign up for stuff or leave feedback, that's the place to go. We have Rector itself has documentation. So it recently added this Rector training repository, which has a bunch of examples. When we were learning it, it didn't have that. So this is a very helpful thing to look at. The next one is, this is the most helpful documentation page that I found, is this nodes overview. This is a giant list of all of the different things a node can be. And the way I've used it is saying like, okay, I don't necessarily know what the name of this thing is in PHP, but I know that it's like, it has an arrow to it, and then it has the name of a method, and it has the brackets. And I just scroll through that page until I see that, and then that is the name of the thing that I need to either edit or create or look for, etc. So it's really good reference. All right. Yeah, besides that, Offer, who's on the call here, I believe, or yeah, he's on the call, has added a blog post which has even more information on the palantir.net blog. So there's a link to that. In terms of development efforts, I found that the most helpful thing is to use Xdebug, which is a debugger for PHP. You can explore the node objects that you and what they have, what they look like, how the connections are maintained within those. The other thing you can do is that nodes have a lot of methods to help you do those things, like to add something to it, to change it, to find a connection. There are also classes. So each rector is a class, and that class has certain methods. It's not always clear to me why some things are on the method and some things, or sorry, are on the class and some things are on the individual nodes. So I found that using Xdebug and kind of seeing the state of the code and what exists at that given point is the best way for me to figure out, like, how do I do the thing that I'm trying to do. All right. Lastly, we're using a sandbox on, that's another repository on the palantir.net GitHub. That sandbox includes, well, the first thing is it's kind of a quick start for developing new rectors. It has a README in it. It uses tools that we use at palantir.net, although they're not really required, or they are not required for Drupal Rector. They're just kind of to help us install something, run something, see that it works, and then start developing for it. So it exists as that GitHub repository. It also includes a Drupal site that's installed. It has a README that has sort of like setup instructions for, we might be changing some of this soon, but instructions on how to set up sort of a sub-repository within that. It's not using sub-modules right now, but kind of creating some symlinks and then running what commands you can use to run the tool against all those other modules. It includes a vagrant or ddev VMs, instructions on how to set those up. And those both support xdebug. So there's some instructions in the sandbox that tell you, hey, if you log into the VM and turn xdebug on with this command, you can do that. And if you add this string before you run the Rector command, it'll trigger the stuff in your IDE to kind of let you listen on the xdebug pieces. It doesn't tell you how to set xdebug up with like PhpStorm, but there are some resources out there already about that. So what are the next steps? We as Palantir have some goals, and there's also some community goals that we'll go over. So Palantir's goals are to maintain this Drupal Rector package. Rector gets we want to update the Rectors themselves, which are those classes and rules. We're focusing on just deprecations for this project. So we want to really cover most of the common deprecations and see how far we can get with that. We also want to potentially cover future deprecations as those happen into Drupal 9. We also want to provide documentation. There's existing documentation in the change records, but we want this module to be an easy way for somebody to download it and say, okay, I know that I need to update Drupal set message, but I don't know what that means. I don't really want to read through this thing necessarily. Can I run it and just see what this tool is telling me it should probably look like? And maybe I can try it and it just works. Those examples are helpful to me, and so we want those to be in there. We also want to have blog posts for the people that want to reference those. So those are our goals. The community has shared goals to expand the scope of the existing Rectors. I mentioned that it is possible to do things like dependency injection. It's just much more complicated. So learning how to do those within Rector and expanding kind of the ways that the Rectors can apply those deprecations would be really good. Those are some goals. Provide documentation around them. Potentially providing a way to provide, sorry, that's redundant, but or maybe not. We want a way to give module maintainers kind of an easy way to just like run their site and get patches for Drupal.org, or potentially even deliver those patches to module maintainers. That's a community goal. And provide support for future Drupal 9 deprecations. So it would be great if, and it's not trivial to create these things, but if a deprecation came out and this was it continues to be a good tool to have those deprecations available, right away as Rectors that people can apply if they want to. All right. I wanted to say thanks to a bunch of people. A bunch of them are on this call. I don't know the best way to pronounce most of these, so I'm not going to call people out by name. But the original project creator for Drupal 8 Rector did a lot of this work and kind of a lot of the surfacing of this information to us. We've had a lot of contributors on either that original Drupal 8 project or Rector project, and also on the project that we have on the Palantir.net repository. And so we wanted to thank those people, and people who have given feedback and guidance. Offer is on the call, and he's done a lot of work. He's the maintainer for this project. And he also works at Palantir.net as a senior front-end developer. So I wanted to thank him. And yeah, lastly, kind of thank everybody else who's joining here. I have like a quick preview, and then I'm just going to open it up to questions. So the quick thing is that we're going to have a contribute. I think I will be around, and I think Offer is also around on Saturday during the contribution day to kind of help people get started with this, or to talk talk about how they might work with Rector if you're interested in using the tool, or if you're interested in developing things for the tool. I guess since I'm on this slide, the last thing is that I think that oh, I was on the wrong one. Sorry, this is the contribution information. This is the feedback slide. So if you have feedback, I believe that this is going to work. I don't remember if it's currently set up, but this, this is going to be the same for all the projects. The code for this one is 6364. And yeah, I just kind of wanted to open up to questions. I think we have about 10 minutes, or maybe 20. I think, what do we have? 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So does Rector's abstract syntax tree here, do the nodes allow me to navigate like up from maybe the given node that I identify? So like in the case of Drupal set message, right, as our example, when I get that node, can I navigate up the chain to say the wrapping method or the wrapping class that's holding the deprecated code, so that I could do things like identify whether or not it implements or extends some base class? So that
yeah, you can. So let me try to do a sharing. Can you see my?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to wing it here, but this is doing the entity type manager. What's that?
Thank you in advance for winging it.
Yeah. Yeah, so that is what this is doing. So there's, I forget the exact one, so we'll have to see, but I'm trying to find out where it is. But yes, the answer to your question is that it can do that, and that's the benefit of having that node tree. It can, I think in this case, I'm looking for the static calls, but you can also look at the static calls for like things that are either within it, or you can go back up and it'll know that like this static call is within. So actually, I think Drupal set message is the better example. I think we're doing exactly what you're saying. Yeah, so we have, here we go. So we're doing Drupal set message, and then we want to know if it's in a class. And so we say class name is node get attribute class name. And then if there's a class name and the class name has this trait, this messenger trait, then we know that we can call the messenger service with this keyword. And so we're doing it in that Drupal set message. And then if we're not in a class that has that trait, then we can't. And so we could do dependency injection, which is more complicated. The quicker solution in this case that we've landed on is we're just going to call it statically. So you can do those kind of look up and down between things.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've tried to look at some of this stuff. I think one of the things that came up in chat, which I'll just mention here since it's not, I don't know if this will be recorded or the chat comments. There was a question about the question mark node as a return type. And somebody said, or I think Chris, you said that it means node or null. I don't know if anyone verified that. It looks like that they did, that you did.
Yeah, it's nullable types. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I'm not sure why that was exactly that way, but I think that was probably copy and pasted from somewhere. Let's see. You had asked about test coverage. I sort of covered on it. Right now, we don't have any tests running as part of the project. We have the examples module, and then as we're developing things, we kind of test them that way. The way that it would fail that it has failed in the past is that Drupal or Rector itself, not Drupal Rector, has had changes, and those changes have caused issues, and the tool just basically produces a bunch of error messages. And so that's the way that while we're testing upgrades to Rector, it's pretty easy to see that those just don't work anymore, and that the Rectors themselves need to be updated based on the tool's changes.
So I want to verify something that we're still kind of staring at here on your screen,
Yeah,
because it's implied, but I want to make sure I'm reading it correctly. So when I get the class name here, and then I get traits by class, uh, so Rector is actually navigating not only the individual class that I'm looking at, but also any like super classes that might extend and traits that those things have as well. So I can tell whether or not the messenger trait is implemented on any class that I might have extended from.
right. And in this case, let me look at the source code. So this was something that came from pretty much copy and pasted, I think, exactly from that Drupal 8 Rector project. This was a helper trait that somebody had added to do that navigation. And so I don't know exactly how it's working because I didn't look too much into it, but it's doing things like get parent class, get traits. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of these methods that exist in that tool.
Cool.
And you not only to look at them, but you can modify them as well. So if you wanted to do something like go up the tree, add the trait to the class, it's possible. I haven't done it because I haven't figured out how to do that yet. And I've been trying to focus on, like I know how to do the static stuff, and I want to kind of get a little bit wider coverage before jumping back and doing some of those more complicated cases. But it's definitely something that would be good if people are interested in it. Yeah, I can pull the code, or I can pull the tool up if we want to take a look. And if anyone has any questions, if you're able to, just kind of jump in and ask the questions.
My audio on?
Yeah, what's that?
So it would be obviously nice if one tool would do it all, and if it could handle the proper dependency injection instead of just doing a static call. But in the short term, we can combine it with our other tools. So either Drush10 or Drupal console can add the dependency injection for us. And then it looks like PHP Rector, if it can find traits, it can maybe also see what services are injected. And if the service is injected, then use that. If we could combine the tools, then that would probably give us a really satisfactory upgrade path in 2 steps. Whereas as it is now, if I'm just replacing Drupal set message with these static calls, and then I have to go back and fix those, it doesn't seem as satisfactory to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't used the tools for the Drupal console, or you said it was only part of Drupal console or also part of Drush?
Drush 10
Okay.
also includes code generation.
Cool.
Hi,
Yeah.
this is Ofer Shah. So we're still trying to also learn Rector itself because it can do so many things. I do believe that within Rector, there is a lot of what we need for the dependency injection. We just need to explore it more. And I also saw just a message from Chris regarding Twig, and I do know that Rector itself know already how to do some upgrades of Twig. But specifically in Drupal Rector, we didn't touch it yet.
Cool. I saw we got some other, yeah, thanks, Offer. We got some other questions. One of them was, how are we keeping track of deprecations? Right now, there are some issues open in the issue queue for the larger ones. And then I think we kind of just have the list. But that's a good question. So maybe the answer to that is that we would want to have a better way of listing the ones that are covered. And
Yeah, do you want to have a documentation page or something?
Yeah, right now there's just a README in the project. And so, either adding a documentation page to Drupal.org or some other thing would be helpful. Yeah, to what Offer said, like the way that we've been trying to do development is to look at examples. And because Rector is used across other projects that are Symfony based or non-Symfony based, think there was like some Laravel stuff in there. They've done similar things that we could potentially use as examples. It just, personally, it's kind of an investment in figuring out how it works. So we wanted to do the simple examples with a couple of these. And then as we learn how to do these more advanced things, we could go back and update the ones that we have, or use those as sort of like copy and paste examples of how to do this stuff like dependency injection. Let's see. Cool. Great. Yeah, I was going to show what maybe I can show what it looks like in PhpStorm when you do a breakpoint to kind of give you an idea of what the developer experience is like. So I've set a breakpoint in the Drupal set message, and then in PhpStorm, you kind of tell it that you're watching for it. The instructions here, so I believe I need to, oops, that's not stuff I was trying to do. I don't think this is going to trigger it, but let me try. No, sorry, one second. Where is my README? All right, this is a command that I need to copy. All right, so that's what it will run if you, yeah, so you can kind of see the output of there. I did a dry run, so it's not replacing them. If I run this command, which is basically figuring out what port I'm on, or sorry, network address I'm on, and then telling it to do that. I don't know how all the like string things that work in Linux, or unless I look it up again, but essentially that's what it's doing, configuring xdebug a little bit on the fly, and then running it. And Rector has this --xdebug flag that you can use. So I'll run that, and hopefully it will stop. I'm not sure if it is. Sorry, let me move this over. And it did not. Okay. That's why demos are not always a great idea. It was working yesterday, but yeah, we don't need to look at that now. Oh, you know what? I know what it is. Sorry, one second. Let me give it one more try. I was not logged in. Yeah, if you want to stick around for a minute, I'll try to start this up and show you what the xdebug looks like in PhpStorm with these Rector classes. If that's interesting, if you have questions, jump out while we're doing this. Otherwise, this is kind of, yeah, we'll have our discussions on Saturday for anyone that's interested, and we're always looking for kind of help and suggestions. All right.
Awesome. Good discussion, folks.
Thanks, Dan. This was great.
Thanks.
So just a quick clarification. We said that it could be used against Twig, but you're not currently doing that. Did I understand that properly?
I believe, well, I know that we aren't doing it now, so it sounds like it is supported in general. But we have,
Yeah,
I don't think
so,
we've tried it with Drupal.
right, we didn't do anything specifically with Drupal because I believe also most of the tweak changes happen to things that core need to change. I don't think themes actually end up using tweak changes. But Rector itself has what they call sets, and these are these packages to upgrade PHP and Twig. So if you just run Rector sets, you'll get a list of all these things. And then you can run, for example, Rector process -- set, I believe, and then Twig 241 is one of the names, and you will see what Rector can do with upgrading Twig to the latest version.
Right. Thanks.
Yeah, so while we're waiting on this, maybe this is what the configuration file looks like, and we wanted to make a configuration file that you could use out of the box, or you could modify if you wanted to. So it's a YAML file. It lists other configuration files, so you can kind of aggregate them up. We've split them up, and by default, we're loading all the deprecations, but we've also split them up by minor releases. And then the stuff that we updated to kind of get this working, as I mentioned before, was this auto load paths configurations to tell to basically look in core or core modules. If you're using doc root, you'd have to modify that here. And then also to tell it that, hey, PHP files in Drupal are also module, theme, etc. files. And then the services key, this could be defined here, but this is where we're loading all of the other ones that are defining those services objects. Next, I'm having issues with my VM, which I think may be because I'm doing screen shares and things, so I'm not going to be able to do the xdebug, but I'll try to get that sorted out, and then if people are interested in taking a look on Saturday, that would be a good time, I think. Thanks.
Very good.
Cool. Well, thanks, everyone. I'll post. Yeah, I guess otherwise the discussion, the page has links to the slides again. Michael had his presentation earlier. That was this one, preparing custom and contributed code for Drupal 9. So I encourage people to check that out and to kind of look over the GitHub page if you're interested. And it has links to the sandbox and other stuff and blog posts. So thanks, everyone. I'm going to stop the screen recording on my end.